The first time Logan Hail heard the bell under Blackwater Lake, he thought it was thunder, until the sound came from beneath the ice and his German shepherd, Shadow, went rigid in the passenger seat like he'd just spotted an IED. In a whiteout blizzard deep in western Montana, Logan's headlights were barely carving a tunnel through the snow when Shadow turned his head toward the dark tree-line, stared like he was listening to something no human could hear, and struck the truck door 3 times with his paw. Tap, tap, tap. Exactly the way he'd been trained to alert, exactly the way he never did unless it mattered. Logan's hands tightened on the wheel, his pulse kicking up with the old familiar combat rhythm he thought he'd left overseas, and then a voice slipped through the storm, weak, broken, and close enough to be real. "Help, anybody out there?" And Logan didn't know it yet, but answering that one plea was going to put him on a collision course with a secret that had been sleeping under Blackwater for decades, and a man powerful enough to burn a town to keep it buried. So Logan eased the pickup to the shoulder, tires grinding in the packed snow, and the moment the engine dropped to idle, the night felt louder, wind screaming through pines, branches snapping like knuckles, the kind of cold that doesn't just bite skin but tries to climb into your chest. Shadow was out before Logan had both boots on the ground, disappearing into the swirling white with the confidence of a dog who knew his job and trusted his handler to follow. Logan clicked on his flashlight and moved after him, one careful step at a time, scanning for wires, for footprints, for anything that didn't fit. He'd been Army once, infantry, then a security contractor for a year after discharge, until the nightmares got too regular and he decided the only thing he wanted guarding was his own quiet. That quiet never lasted. Shadow's bark cut through the storm, sharp and urgent, and Logan found the source, a collapsed pit masked by fresh snow, the edge caved in like a trapdoor. Down inside, an older man was wedged at an angle, face streaked with ice, breath coming out in ragged clouds, one leg twisted in a way that made Logan's stomach tighten. "Please," the man begged, voice cracking, "I can't feel my foot." Logan dropped to a knee, anchored his stance, and pulled a rope from the truck, because soldiers don't stop carrying rope, even when they stop carrying a rifle. "Hang on," Logan said, steady like a medic, "you're not dying out here tonight." Shadow clamped his jaws onto the rope and dug his paws into the snow, bracing like he'd done it 100 times, and the old man started to rise, inch by inch, until Logan hauled him up onto the road. The man collapsed, shaking hard, then looked at Shadow like he'd just met an angel. Shadow leaned in and licked his frozen knuckles. The man's eyes flooded. "Good boy," he whispered, and Logan caught something else in that whisper too. Relief, yes, but also terror, like he hadn't just fallen into a pit. Like he'd been put there. So, in the truck's weak heater, the man introduced himself as Henry Dawson, and Logan could hear pain behind every word, the kind that doesn't belong only to a broken leg. Henry kept glancing out the windows as if he expected headlights to appear behind them, as if the storm wasn't protection but cover. Logan tried calling 911 and got nothing but dead air. The mountains swallowed signal the way they swallowed sound. "We need to get you to Kalispell," Logan said, naming the nearest big town he could think of without looking at a map. Henry shook his head fast, wincing. "Not town," he said. "Not yet. Take me to the lake." Logan stared at him. "The lake?" Henry's mouth trembled before he forced the words out. "Blackwater. There's a place, an old tavern. If I don't get there, if the bell rings—" He stopped, swallowed hard, and Logan watched his throat work like he was choking down a truth. Shadow sat up straighter, ears pricked, as if the name Blackwater meant something to him too. Logan didn't believe in local legends, but he believed in patterns. An injured man in a hidden pit, insisting on a remote lake in a blizzard, terrified of something behind him. The smart move would have been to drive the opposite direction. The human move was to follow. Logan turned the wheel toward the forest road that led to Blackwater Lake, and the tires crunched forward into the storm like he'd just accepted a mission he couldn't back out of, because if Henry was right about a bell, then whatever it warned about wasn't waiting for daylight. So Blackwater Tavern appeared out of the white like a half-remembered photograph, a weather-beaten building slumped near the shoreline with a crooked sign swinging on rusty chains. The letters were faded but readable in Logan's flashlight beam. Blackwater Tavern. It looked abandoned, but it didn't feel empty. Inside, the air was stale and cold, tables coated with dust, old framed photos on the walls, rescue crews, fishermen, families posed in front of boats that probably rotted years ago. And underneath it all was a low metallic hum, so faint Logan wasn't sure if he heard it or felt it, like a vibration living in the bones of the building. Henry sagged into a chair, breathing through clenched teeth while Logan wrapped his leg and propped it up. Shadow paced, nose down, then froze at a spot near the bar and tapped the floor 3 times with his paw. Tap, tap, tap. Logan crouched, pressed his palm to the boards, and felt it. A steady pulse from below, too rhythmic to be the wind, too alive to be settling wood. Henry's eyes went wide. "Don't," he said instantly, voice small and urgent. "Don't open it." Logan looked up. "Open what?" Henry swallowed and leaned forward as if he was afraid the tavern itself might hear. "The hatch," he whispered. "If you wake it up, the lake won't sleep again." Logan should have laughed. He didn't, because the vibration under his hand felt less like a machine and more like a heartbeat, and Shadow was staring at the floor with a focus Logan remembered from war zones, when the dog knew danger was close, and all you could do was decide whether to trust him. So they tried to wait out the storm, but the night wouldn't let them settle. Logan fed Shadow from his field bowl, the same scratched metal dish that had followed them through training and deployment and whatever came after. Henry drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling names, pleading with someone who wasn't there, then snapping awake whenever the wind hit the tavern just right. Around 2 in the morning, Shadow's growl rolled through the room, low, deep, warning. Logan stood instantly, flashlight in hand, and heard it too. A scream outside, thin and distant, swallowed fast by the blizzard. He was through the door before Henry could speak, boots punching through drifts as the flashlight beams swept the shoreline. Out on the frozen lake, a figure was flailing near a dark hole in the ice. A fisherman who'd broken through and was trying to claw his way out with useless, numb hands. Logan's instinct screamed about thin ice and bad angles, but his feet kept moving anyway. He dropped flat, crawled forward, and threw a rope toward the man. Shadow stayed back, braced, ready to anchor. The fisherman caught the rope and Logan pulled, slow, controlled, every muscle locked. Then the sound hit them, a massive bronze bell, ringing from beneath the tavern, from beneath the ground, from beneath the world. Gong, gong, gong. The vibration rolled across the ice like a living thing, and Logan's hands almost slipped from the rope. The fisherman's eyes went wide. "What the hell is that?" he gasped. Logan didn't answer, because Henry had stepped into the doorway behind him, face washed pale in the flashlight spill, and in a voice barely louder than the storm he said, "See? It rang again." And Logan realized the worst part wasn't that the bell existed, it was that it had rung before, and Henry had been terrified it would ring tonight, as if the bell wasn't warning about the lake, but announcing that something under the lake had noticed them. So Logan hauled the fisherman onto safer ice and dragged him toward shore while Shadow anchored and Henry watched like a man reliving an old nightmare. Inside the tavern, Logan wrapped the fisherman in blankets and forced warm water into his hands, and only then did the man get out his name, Eli Porter, local, stubborn, the kind of guy who'd fish through a blizzard just to prove he could. Eli stared at Henry. "You heard it too," he said. Henry didn't deny it. Logan set the flashlight on the counter like a spotlight and looked at Henry the way he used to look at informants overseas, calm, patient, but unmovable. "Start talking," Logan said. Henry's throat bobbed. He glanced at Shadow as if asking permission from the only creature in the room who couldn't be bought. "My father built this place," Henry began. "Not the tavern. Under it." He nodded toward the floor. "The rescue network." Logan repeated the words. "Network." Henry breathed out hard, like confession. 17 rescue points around the lake. Hidden stations. Old radios. Oops. Flares. When the lake tried to take someone, when ice gave out or fog rolled in, my father rang the bell. Everyone who knew the code came running. That bell saved people. Eli snorted softly, half disbelief. "Then why are you afraid of it?" Henry's eyes were wet now. "Because someone learned how to use it," he said. "And now when it rings, it doesn't always mean someone needs saving." He paused, and Logan felt the air change, Like the moment before a door opens on something you can't unsee. Sometimes, Henry whispered, it means someone's about to disappear. So, when daylight finally arrived, it didn't bring comfort. It just revealed the same world in clearer detail, the trees bent and frosted, the lake flat and white like a blank page hiding a story underneath. Logan made coffee on a small camping stove he kept in the truck, and while Henry sipped with shaking hands, Logan went to the floorboards where Shadow had tapped. "Don't," Henry said again, but his voice had less fight in it now. Maybe he knew the truth was coming either way. Logan pried up the boards with a tire iron. Beneath them was a metal hatch, old but maintained, with scratches like something heavy had been moved across it recently. Shadow went down first, nails clicking on the wooden steps, and Logan followed with his flashlight. The air below was colder and damp, tinged with something chemical, diesel, oil, metal. The corridor opened into a bunker-like space, shelves lined with rescue equipment, oxygen tanks, coil after coil of rope, and a wall covered in old maps, hand-drawn routes around Blackwater, numbered points, and one number repeated again and again in thick marker, 17. At the far end sat a massive bronze bell, bigger than any church bell Logan had ever seen, its surface scored and dented like it had survived wars of its own. A plaque on its base read Blackwater Rescue Network. Henry came down slow behind him, pale and sweating. "My father rang it when the lake was hungry," he said. Logan studied the maps, then noticed the red X marks, multiple, scattered, deliberate. "What are those?" Logan asked. Henry's mouth tightened as if he tasted blood. "Places we didn't make it in time," he said. Logan stared at the pattern, because the X marks weren't random. They formed lines, clusters, like someone was guiding victims toward certain spots. Logan looked up. "That's not accidents," he said quietly. Henry's eyes met his, full of shame. "No," he admitted. "It's someone pushing people onto the ice." And Logan felt that soldier-cold certainty settle in his gut. Whatever was happening at Blackwater wasn't superstition. It was organized. So Shadow sniffed along the corridor and stopped at a steel locker bolted to the wall. He pawed it once, then twice, then sat and stared at Logan, the way he did when he'd found something dangerous and wanted permission to escalate. Logan yanked the handle. He wedged the tire iron into the seam and popped it open. Inside were folders sealed in plastic, Polaroids, and a small waterproof case with a thumb drive. Logan flipped through the photos first, and his stomach tightened with every image. Men in hard hats near the shoreline at night, cables stretched across the ice, a buoy that looked like a marker but wasn't. Then a shot taken from above, underwater lights illuminating something beneath the surface. Pipes, platforms, metal frames anchored to the lakebed. Drilling rigs. Not rumor. Not legend. Industrial equipment hidden under a frozen lake. Henry's face went gray when he saw Logan's expression. "He came 5 years ago," Henry said. "Promised jobs. Promised the town a future. Said the lake was an obstacle, not a home." Logan kept flipping until he saw a clear image of a man stepping out of a black truck, smiling at the camera like he owned the world. Henry said the name like a curse. Ryder Cole. North Frontier Energy. And Logan understood the scale instantly. If a corporation was drilling under a protected lake, then the bell wasn't just a rescue tool. It was a threat to an operation worth millions, maybe billions. Logan looked at Henry. "Why didn't you go public?" Henry's eyes dropped. "I tried," he said. "Then my father died. Brakes failed on a mountain road. Nobody investigated. And when you live in a small county where everyone's paycheck comes from the same man, truth becomes expensive." Logan stared back at the rigs in the photo and felt a new kind of rage, clean, focused, dangerous. Because this wasn't just environmental crime. Those red X marks were bodies. So the black truck arrived before Logan could decide what to do next, rolling up the tavern drive like it belonged there. It was absurdly polished against the wilderness, a luxury machine in a place built for rust and grit. Ryder Cole stepped out wearing a tailored coat and an easy smile, flanked by 2 men who didn't look like locals. Shadow's hackles rose. Ryder's eyes flicked to the dog, then to Logan, then to Henry, as if he was assessing inventory. Henry Dawson, Ryder said warmly, like an old friend. Still freezing out here? Henry pushed himself upright with a grunt. Leave, he snapped. Ryder sighed as if Henry was a child. I'm here to save you from yourself. Sell the property. Take the buyout. Move somewhere with hospitals and paved roads. Henry's voice shook with anger. Over my dead body. Ryder's smile didn't vanish, it sharpened. That can be arranged, he said softly, then turned to Logan. And you are. Logan didn't give him rank, didn't give him history. Logan, he said. Ryder's gaze lingered a beat too long. Logan, he repeated, tasting it. You military? Logan stayed quiet. Silence is an answer men like Ryder understand. Ryder nodded once. Well, he said, I admire service. But you don't want to get tangled in local business. People get hurt. Shadow let out a low growl and Ryder's eyes chilled. He leaned closer to Henry, voice low enough that the storm outside almost swallowed it. Last offer, Ryder said. Sign, or the lake takes what the lake takes. Then he walked back to his truck and drove off, leaving tracks in the snow that looked a lot like a countdown. So that night, Logan didn't sleep. He sat in the tavern with his back to a wall, knife within reach, flashlight on the table, Shadow curled at his feet but awake, ears tracking every sound. He kept thinking about Afghanistan, about how the loudest danger wasn't gunfire, it was the quiet before gunfire, the moment when the air warned you something was about to happen. Henry lay on a makeshift bed, sweating through pain, and whispered to Logan in the dark, "He'll burn it." Logan didn't ask who. He already knew. Around midnight, Shadow lifted his head and stared toward the back of the building. Logan caught a faint smell, fuel, maybe, or smoke. He stood, stepped toward the rear door, and the explosion hit. The tavern lurched like it had been punched by a giant, windows rattling, the air filling with dust and heat. Flames bloomed behind the building, orange against the snow, climbing fast. Logan sprinted to Henry, hauled him up, and half-carried him toward the door. Shadow followed close, and as they burst into the storm, a burning beam crashed down near the threshold. Shadow jumped and yelped. His paw clipped flame. Logan's heart snapped tight in his chest. He dropped Henry onto the snow, grabbed Shadow, and pressed Snow against the burned pad while Shadow trembled, fighting pain to stay focused. Henry coughed, eyes watering, and grabbed Logan's sleeve with surprising strength. "Listen," he rasped, voice shredding, "the bell, it wasn't just for rescues." Logan leaned in close, face stung by smoke. Henry's eyes locked on his. "It exposes the liars," he whispered. "It makes the whole valley look. That's why he wants it dead." Henry's grip weakened, his breath ragged. Logan's voice broke despite him. "You're not dying," he said. Henry managed a faint, sad smile. "Maybe not," he whispered. "But if I do, ring it anyway." And as the tavern burned behind them, Logan realized Ryder wasn't just threatening him. Ryder was willing to kill history itself to protect what was under the ice. So Logan dragged Henry and Shadow into the underground corridor through the hatch before the fire could collapse the floor. The bunker air was colder but clean, and Logan worked like a combat medic, checking Henry's pulse, stabilizing the leg, controlling shock. Shadow panted through pain, leaning into Logan's hand when Logan wrapped his paw in gauze torn from a shirt. "Good," Logan murmured, more to himself than the dog. "Stay with me." The bell's bronze surface glowed faintly in the emergency lantern light, huge and silent now, like it was waiting for an order. Logan pulled the thumb drive from the locker case and stared at it. Evidence. Proof. But proof doesn't matter if it never reaches anyone. He tried his phone again, no signal. Then he noticed an old radio on a shelf, dust wiped clean like it had been used recently. He turned the dial. Static, then a faint voice. "Station 17, do you copy?" Logan froze. He leaned close. "This is Logan," he said into the mic. "Who is this?" A pause, then an older man's voice, cautious and steady. "Name's Walt. Used to run point 3 on the old network. Haven't heard that bell in years." Logan swallowed. "The tavern's burning," he said. "Henry's hurt. There are rigs under the lake. Ryder Cole." The radio went silent so long Logan thought he'd lost him. Then Walt spoke, voice suddenly sharp. "So it's true." Logan's jaw tightened. "How many people know?" Walt exhaled. "Enough to be scared. Not enough to be brave." Logan stared at the bell. "Then we make them brave," he said. "How?" Walt asked. Logan's hand settled on the bell's striker mechanism. "We ring it," Logan answered, and even before the words finished, he understood what ringing it would mean, not just calling help, but declaring war in a valley where Ryder Cole had been writing the rules. So Logan struck the bell manually, and the first gong shook dust from the corridor ceiling. The second rolled outward like a wave you could feel in your ribs. The third seemed to reach the lake itself, vibrating through ice and stone and snow, a sound too old and too big to ignore. Logan keyed the radio and spoke into it like he was calling an airstrike. "All stations," he said. "If you ever answered this bell, answer it tonight. Bring lights. Bring cameras. Bring witnesses. And don't step onto the ice until I tell you." Static cracked, then voices, confused at first, then urgent. "That bell? Who is this?" "I'm coming. My dad told me about Station 12. Logan's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something like hope. Outside, engines began to echo in the distance, snowmobiles, trucks, people who'd lived their whole lives beside Blackwater and finally had permission to admit they were afraid. Henry opened his eyes on the stretcher, weak but conscious, and when the bell's vibration faded, he whispered, "You did it." Logan looked down at him. "Stay alive," Logan said. Henry's mouth twitched. "You too," he whispered back. Shadow pushed his head against Logan's knee, a quiet reminder that Logan wasn't alone even if this went bad. But then Logan heard something else, an approaching convoy, heavier engines, purposeful. He climbed the stairs toward the hatch with Shadow limping behind him, and as he cracked it open, headlights cut through the snow on the lake road like a line of predators arriving to feed. Ryder Cole had heard the bell too. And Ryder was coming to shut it up for good. So the shoreline became a staging ground under the blizzard sky. Locals arrived first, men with hunting rifles slung low, women with flashlights and first aid kits, teenagers with phones already recording because in 2026, truth doesn't exist until it has a video. Then Ryder's black trucks rolled in, pristine and aggressive, and Ryder stepped out like he owned the night. He raised his voice for the crowd, calm and practiced. "Folks," he said, "this area is under private lease. You're trespassing on an active industrial site. It's dangerous." Logan moved into view, standing between the hatch and the ice, Shadow at his side, bandaged paw held just slightly off the snow. "It is dangerous," Logan called back, "because you put illegal rigs under this lake." The crowd murmured, disbelief colliding with suspicion they'd carried for years. Ryder's smile didn't waver. "That's absurd," he said. "And you are." Logan didn't give him a speech. "I'm the guy who's going to show them," he answered. Ryder's eyes narrowed, and for the first time he looked genuinely annoyed, because a corporation can buy a sheriff, but it can't buy a crowd once the crowd has momentum. Ryder signaled subtly to one of his men, and Logan saw it the way he'd seen hand signals in combat zones. Quiet, efficient, violent intent. Shadow growled. Logan whispered, "Easy." Then the ice moaned, one long crack, like the lake was warning them all. Steam drifted from a patch near the center, unnatural against the cold, and Logan understood the most terrifying part. The rigs weren't just illegal. They were unstable. Warmth under ice meant thinning. Pressure pockets meant blowouts. One wrong move and Blackwater could open up like a mouth and take everyone standing too close. Logan lifted both hands. "Back up from the shore," he ordered the crowd. "Now." People hesitated, looking between him and Ryder. Ryder spread his arms. "Listen to me," he said smoothly, "not some drifter with a dog." Logan's voice cut through, sharp as command. "I'm former U.S. Army," he said, "and I'm telling you this lake is rigged to kill." The words hit harder than the wind. And when the crowd stepped back, choosing Logan, Ryder's smile finally faltered, just enough for everyone to see the man behind the mask. So, a diver arrived, an older man named Walt, bundled in gear that looked like it had been used and repaired for decades. He didn't waste time on introductions. "Where's the access point?" he asked. Logan pointed to the steaming patch. Walt nodded once, like he'd expected it. Ropes were anchored to trucks, spotlights were positioned, and phones stayed raised. Ryder tried again, louder now. "This is a liability," he warned. "You're interfering with operations that feed this county." A woman in the crowd shouted back, voice cracking, "My brother went missing last winter." Another voice followed, "My dad fell through the ice right by that spot." Ryder's jaw tightened. Logan looked at Walt. "You sure?" Walt met his gaze. "I ran Station 3 back when your dog's bell meant salvation," he said. "If there's something under there, we find it." Walt cut a hole at the edge of the thin patch, eased himself into the black water, and vanished beneath the ice with a rope line trailing behind him. The crowd fell quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Logan stood rigid, shadow leaning against his leg, and the seconds felt like minutes. Then the rope jerked, once, twice, 3 times. Walt surfaced, ripping off his mask, eyes wide with something close to horror. "There's a platform down there," he shouted. "Pipes. Lights. A cage." The word cage hit the crowd like a punch. Ryder stepped forward sharply. "That's enough," he snapped, and his men moved. Logan saw them head for the rope anchor. If they cut the line, Walt could die under the ice. Logan lunged, slamming one man back, and Shadow sprang forward with controlled force, teeth clamping onto a sleeve and yanking hard enough to stop the advance without going for the throat. The man screamed and fell back. Phones captured everything. Ryder shouted, furious now, "Call the sheriff." Logan didn't stop. "Keep filming," he yelled to the crowd. "Don't let him own the story." And as the wind whipped snow across the spotlights, Logan realized this was the turning point. If the footage survived the night, Ryder was done. If it didn't, Logan and everyone here would become another red X on Henry's maps. So the ice cracked again, louder, and a segment near the steaming patch collapsed inward with a violent splash that sent a shockwave up the shore. A pipe end breached the surface briefly, spitting oily water. People screamed and scrambled back. Ryder's men hesitated, fear finally overcoming orders, because you can't intimidate physics. Logan grabbed the rope and hauled Walt away from the hole while others helped, and Walt coughed up freezing water, spitting out words between gasps. "That cage," he wheezed, "it's storage. Not rescue. There's fabric, coats, gloves, stuff that doesn't drift down there on its own." A woman in the crowd made a sound like an animal, like grief had finally found its voice. "They were right here," she sobbed. "They were right under us." Ryder stepped forward again, face hard, and for a split second Logan saw calculation in his eyes. If the lake was destabilizing, Ryder might let it blow and blame nature, destroy evidence in chaos. Ryder's gaze flicked to the crowd, then back to Logan, and his expression settled into something cold and final. "You don't understand the scale of what you're interfering with," Ryder said. Logan stared back. "I understand bodies," Logan answered. "I understand cover-ups. I understand men who think they're untouchable." Ryder's lip curled. "You think you're a hero because you saved an old man and rang a bell?" Logan's chest tightened, because it wasn't about being a hero. It was about being tired of watching evil win. Logan took one step closer. "I rang it," he said, voice low, "because you've been using this lake like a grave." Ryder's men shifted again, and Logan knew he was one signal away from a firefight on a frozen shore. Then sirens echoed through the trees, state troopers, not the local sheriff, and behind them, a news van. Someone had streamed the bell. Someone had called outside the county. Ryder's shoulders stiffened, and Logan saw the first real fear flash across his face. Not fear of prison. Fear of exposure. Because Ryder's true power wasn't money, it was silence, and silence was breaking. So when the troopers arrived, the scene snapped into a different kind of tension. Badges, radios, floodlights, official voices trying to regain control of something that had already gone public. Logan handed over the thumb drive and the plastic-sealed folders, and he watched the trooper's expression change as he scrolled through photos of underwater platforms and unregistered equipment. A trooper looked at Ryder and said, flat, "Sir, you need to step away from your vehicles." Ryder protested, polished words about legal teams and permits, but the crowd started shouting over him, every accusation fueled by years of quiet dread. Logan stayed near Henry's stretcher as paramedics finally got to him, and Henry's eyes fluttered open once more. "You did it," Henry whispered, voice thin but steady now. Logan leaned in. "We did," he corrected, glancing at Shadow. Shadow stood close, trembling slightly from pain and exhaustion, but his eyes were bright, locked on Logan like he was still on duty. Henry's mouth quivered. "My father, he'd be proud," he said. Logan didn't trust himself to answer. He just squeezed Henry's hand. Ryder was placed in cuffs, still trying to speak like he could talk his way out of gravity, but as he passed Logan, he leaned close and hissed, "You have no idea who you just embarrassed." Logan met his eyes and saw the truth. Ryder wasn't the top of the pyramid. He was a piece. But tonight, a piece was enough. "Tell them," Logan said quietly, "I'm not afraid of rich men anymore." Ryder's stare lingered on Shadow, then on Logan, then he was guided away. And for the first time since he'd come home from war, Logan felt something inside him loosen, like maybe the world could be forced, sometimes, to do the right thing. So dawn came slow, pale light spilling across Blackwater like it didn't want to touch what had happened. The tavern was a blackened skeleton on the shore, smoking in the cold air, and yet beneath it the underground corridor remained intact. Maps still pinned, ropes still coiled, the bell still standing like a stubborn witness that refused to die. The troopers brought in environmental enforcement and federal investigators before noon, and for once, nobody in the county could pretend it was just another accident. Logan sat on the tailgate of his pickup with Shadow's bandaged paw in his lap while a vet tech from one of the responders cleaned the burn properly. Shadow didn't flinch much, just leaned into Logan's hand, trusting him with the pain. Logan's voice dropped to a whisper only the dog could hear. "I'm sorry," he said. Shadow blinked, then rested his head against Logan's thigh like forgiveness was simple. Henry was loaded into an ambulance, stable now, and before the doors shut, he caught Logan's eye and gave him a small nod, the kind old men give when they've carried something too long and finally feel it lift. Logan walked back to the hatch one last time, stood in front of the bell, and ran his fingers over the bronze scars. "You kept ringing," he murmured, not sure if he was talking to the bell or to Henry's father or to the part of himself that had survived war and still believed in duty. Shadow limped up beside him and sat, posture straight, ears alert even in peace. Logan looked down at him and finally let himself smile. Small, tired, real. "Good job, buddy," he said. Shadow gave a soft bark, and in the quiet after that bark, Blackwater Lake felt different. Not healed, not innocent, but no longer asleep under a lie. And as the sun climbed over the Montana pines, the bell under Blackwater didn't ring again, because for the first time in years, the valley wasn't depending on a secret warning to do what should have been done out loud. So, if you want, I can also provide a separate, voiceover-ready version with slightly shorter sentences and more breath beats for narration, while still keeping the same story and length. Should I do that?